This pizza recipe is sponsored by Audible. Start listening with a 30-day free trial by using my link in the description. This is an update of a video I posted a year ago about how I try to make New York-style pizza in a home kitchen. I'm going to show you how my technique has evolved over the last year, and also try to explain things a little better than maybe I did the first time, including what this style of pizza actually is. Start with the dough. Yes, I normally make my pizza dough in a stand mixer, but I will never cook in a stand mixer on the internet again, because I don't want people to get the impression that they need something so expensive to make good food. You don't. All you need is a bowl. Ideally a big bowl with a wide base. These days I start by putting in all my water, about 2.5 cups of warm water. Then some sugar, a tablespoon. Some people might say that's a lot. I don't think that it makes the dough taste sweet. It does, however, help the crust brown at home oven temperatures, which are going to be lower than professional oven temperatures. That's our main challenge here. In goes a teaspoon of active dry yeast. Mix that up and let it sit for 5 minutes. Give that yeast a chance to rehydrate and to eat some of the sugar in there and to be fruitful and multiply. This is called blooming, and it is not necessary. The dough will rise regardless. The reason people do this is to check to see if their yeast is still alive. And guess what? This was dead. Look, no change. I've been working from this jar of yeast since my first pizza video a year ago, and this yeast is no more. It has ceased to be. It's expired and gone to meet its maker. So let's try this again with fresh yeast. You wait a few minutes, and then here's my favorite part. I am not speeding up this footage. This is real time. I love that. Okay, now I am speeding it up. Gonna put in some olive oil. Maybe that's 2 tablespoons or something. Some pros don't use oil in their dough. Again, I think that it helps the crust brown in a home oven. Then in goes a tablespoon of salt. Some people say that will kill the yeast. That is a myth, as you shall plainly see. Certainly with enough salt and enough time, you will kill the yeast, but this will not. Now flour. I use bread flour, which has a higher protein content than all-purpose flour. You can use all-purpose, it just won't be quite as chewy and stretchy. There's even higher protein flours that you can buy on the internet, but this is in every American grocery store. I start with 5 cups by volume. Sure, that's not an accurate way of measuring flour, but this is just a starting point. I'm going to add more flour by feel as we need. I usually just bring that together with a spatula or something, then get my hand in there and knead. You can take it out and knead on the table, of course, but with a nice wide bowl like this, you can keep the mess entirely contained in the bowl. I'm just gathering it together and then pushing it down with the weight of my body behind my palm. When it gets so sticky that I can't really work with it, I'll sprinkle on a little bit more flour. As little as possible, though. I really prefer wetter doughs these days. They bake up lighter and crispier. The only downside is they're sticky and hard to work with, so I'm adding the minimal flour to keep it workable. The test to see if it's ready is to see if you can stretch out a patch of it really thin without it tearing. That is not ready yet. By the way, some pros would say if you're going to use oil in your dough, you should add it at this stage rather than at the beginning. They say you got to let the flour hydrate first before you introduce the fat. The problem with that is that it's hard to knead oil into a dough that's already gone smooth and elastic like this, especially when you're kneading by hand. I've done it both ways, and I think the texture of the finished product is virtually indistinguishable. I just don't think it makes a big difference in a dough this lean. All right, I've kneaded this for 10 minutes, and now I can stretch it thin without it tearing. This is enough dough for 4 home oven-sized pizzas, so I've got 4 containers here, big enough for the dough balls to double in size. I'm pouring a little olive oil into each. Then you could use a scale to divide this into 4 equal balls, or you could do what I usually do these days, which is to tear the ball in half. Then heft each ball for weight. If one feels heavier, transfer some dough to the other ball. One of those goes back into the bowl, and then we do the same to this. Tear it in half, heft the balls for weight. Then it's time to shape them reasonably smooth and round. The shaping doesn't really matter so much with a wetter dough like this, because it's just going to kind of go into the container no matter what we do. Then what I like to do is use the ball like a paintbrush to oil the inside of the bowls. In the process, the balls themselves get good and covered in oil too. Very efficient system. The oil helps to keep the balls from drying out, which is especially important if you're going to keep these in the fridge for up to a week, as I do. It also helps you get them out of the containers later, and the thick coating of oil on the surface again helps the crust brown at home oven temperatures, because oil is such an effective thermal interface. Cover them up, up, and then you could either rise them on the table for a couple hours and then bake them, or what I do is throw them straight into the fridge. Some people rise them at room temperature for a bit before refrigerating. I think that makes almost no difference, and this way you can just throw them in and forget about them. I make my dough when I'm not hungry, and then after at least 24 hours cold rise, these are ready, and I can bake one super easily and quickly whenever I want. They're already portioned. Though I do think these basically get better as they age in the fridge up to a week. I have a whole video about that, which is linked in the description. Okay, time to bake. You need a hot surface to bake on, and I have recently switched from a stone to a steel. I have a video that systematically compares the two. It's also linked in the description. The steel is simply more thermally conductive. It would be too thermally conductive for a 1,000-degree wood-fired oven, but for a home oven, it's perfect. I've recently started putting it on the second highest rack position. I find that's best for browning the top, but every oven is different. You want to get your oven as hot as it goes, though. For me, that's 550 Fahrenheit on the convection roast setting, and I will preheat my steel for a full hour. You could do less, but this gets me a noticeably browner, crispier crust, and electricity is absurdly cheap here in America. Okay, now cheese. One of the things that makes this style of pizza different from, say, Neapolitan pizza is low moisture mozzarella. If you use fresh mozzarella, you can only use a little bit of it. Otherwise, your pizza will become soaked in whey. That's why Neapolitan pizza only has splotches of cheese. New York pizza has a solid layer. Part skim low moisture mozz is very easy to find, but the whole milk version tastes a lot better and it's much harder to find. I used to be able to get it molded into sticks, Galbani's string cheese. This was a pain to unwrap, but it was a good cheese. Now they only have the part skim kind at my stores, so I'm struggling to find a replacement. There is this whole milk low moisture mozz from Walmart. It is not a great cheese, but it's the right style. I will say beware of this cheese from Polly-O, which a lot of people like for pizza, but this cheese they sell retail is not what I would call a true low moisture cheese. It's basically medium moisture. Look how much smoother the Polly-O is compared to this Walmart cheese. Look at how much squishier it is. When I taste them, not only is the true low moisture cheese on the left noticeably drier, it is also tangier, which is key. Polly-O does make a good whole milk low moisture cheese for pizza, but only in these big 7.5-pound loaves for commercial use. This is a different cheese from what you will find in the grocery case, though you might be able to get it at your deli counter. Honestly, if you live in a bigger city, you'll probably have plenty more good options than me. This Walmart cheese is what I've got today. It's 1 pound. I tend to do about 7 ounces on my pizzas, so this is a little more than what I need for 2 pizzas. And then crucially, I'm going to put it back in the fridge after I grate it. I have found that in my oven, at least, if I keep the cheese cold, it's less likely to overheat and squeeze out an orange grease layer before it's had the chance to brown in the oven. Okay, now sauce. The New York style pizza that I'm talking about here is a street food. It's cheap. It's generally made with canned sauce products. A popular one with New York joints is Full Red, which only comes in number 10 cans for commercial use. That's almost 7 pounds of sauce. This right here, far and away, is the closest thing to that stuff that I can find in U.S. grocery stores. Pastene Kitchen Ready crushed tomatoes. Really good. It's very strong. I don't have to supplement it with tomato paste. I do put in a pinch of sugar, some dried oregano, and a lot of olive oil. I love fresh oil in pizza sauce, but you do you. There's enough for like 4 or 5 homemade pizzas in a 28-ounce can. I've just mixed up enough sauce there for 1 pizza. The key thing is to not cook this sauce before it goes on the pizza. Canned foods are already cooked a little. Canning requires heat. If you cook your sauce any more than that, you're likely to lose the brightness that is key to this style. You end up with a flavor that reminds me more of lasagna than of pizza. Here is my pizza peel. You need something big and flat to shimmy the pizza out onto the steel. I used to do it with a sheet of cardboard back in college. You need a granular matter to keep it from sticking, and I'm back to using cornmeal. I know I said that I don't like the grittiness, but I don't know. It's traditional in my mind, and for some reason I just like that, even though I don't really like that. Now what I do is put a plate on there and then some flour on the plate. I pull the dough straight out of the fridge. I do not warm it up before I work with it. This is a very wet dough, and the cold helps keep it workably stiff. I take it out while deflating it as little as possible and then get it coated in flour. I didn't used to do this step, but again, wet dough, got to keep it from sticking. And yeah, I know how to toss pizzas in the air. I still prefer to just do the gravity stretch method. I just go around the edge, forming the thick cornice while letting the rest of the dough fall and stretch out naturally. This is, most significantly, cleaner than tossing it in the air. I think it gives you a little more control, and no, it does not give you a perfect circle like centrifugal force does, was, but guess what? I don't want a perfect circle. I want an oblong. A characteristic of New York-style pizza is it's wide enough that you can get foldable slices. And it's basically as thin as you can get it. In a home oven, I can bake a wider, thinner pizza if I just let it be shaped like an oval. Sauce goes on, smoothing it out with the back of a spoon. I generally feel that if I've put on a little less sauce than is my instinct to put on, then it's going to taste perfect. You got to remember how thin this is. For flavor, I think it's key to sprinkle on a little grated parmesan under the mozz layer. Some New York-style places do this, others don't. I think it adds a lot, and you can still put more on top later if you want. Then the mozz. I find that if I start by sprinkling it around the edge first and then work my way in, that gives me the most even distribution. Again, if it feels like not quite enough to me, then it ends up being just right. Then very quickly, before this dough bonds to the wood, bring it over to the oven, a little shimmy just to make sure it's going to release, and then shimmy it out onto the steel. A pizza this thin in an oven this hot cooks really fast, 6 or 7 minutes. It's a game of chicken with the cheese. I want to wait until I've got as much color as possible, but right before it starts to overheat and squeeze out its fat. Rather than taking the pizza out with the peel, I usually grab it with tongs and pull it straight out onto a cooling rack. Main reason I do this is so that I can be building the next pizza on the peel while this is baking. But I also think this is a little cleaner, and I definitely like to rest the pizza on the rack. It keeps the crust crispy. When it's cooled down a bit, it's solid enough to cut cleanly. I honestly don't think that pizza cutters are good tools for the home, because when you use them on a little home cutting board like this, they're likely to fall off the edge and hurt your table. For a pizza this size, a good old chef's knife is a perfectly adequate tool, and it's safer. It gives you more control. Now look at how brown the bottom is. You can even see some leopard spotting there, like they get in the wood-fired brick ovens. I've never achieved that with a pizza stone in a home oven, only with a steel. That's really tasty. It's the taste I grew up with, and if you make your dough in advance, it's a pretty easy weeknight family meal. Now, if after all that you've got pizza on the mind, might I suggest going on Audible and listening to Sashir Zameda's comedy special, Pizza Mind, which you can do for free.
At first, she was like, I want you to bring home a God-fearing man. And then years went by, and I didn't bring anyone home. And she goes, I want you to bring home a man.
No, it's not about making pizza. She uses pizza as a metaphor. But anyway, I love her, and I love how Audible allows me to make fun or productive time out of lost time, like when I have to do the dishes after a shoot. Whether it's comedy specials or books, Audible has the world's largest selection of audio entertainment, including Audible Originals, which are stories created exclusively for audio. Whether you're driving around or hitting the gym this time of year as I am, Audible can keep you entertained, informed, and inspired. Anytime you can't read, you can listen with the Audible app on any device. Start listening with a 30-day Audible trial. Choose one audiobook and 2 Audible Originals absolutely free. Visit audible.com/Adam Ragusea or text Adam Ragusea to 500-500. And get Pizza Mind. Will my pizza process continue to evolve? I'll let you know in a year.